Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and honestly misunderstood figures in comparative mythology. We are talking about Kovalan, the protagonist of the ancient Tamil epic Cilappatikāram. A lot of the time, he just gets reduced to this really simplistic label. People call him the flawed, wandering husband who abandoned his totally devoted wife, Kanaki. But when you actually dig into the classical text, it reveals a character with incredible historical depth, psychological complexity, and serious ancient sociological importance. So we're going to deconstruct Kovalan today to figure out his true role in this absolute masterpiece.
So here's how we're going to break this down today. First, the merchant prince profile. Then, the aesthetic archetype, followed by the compassionate warrior and ancient philanthropy meets CSR. Finally, we'll wrap up with victim of judicial failure and his arc of karmic repentance. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Merchant Prince Profile. Heir to an ancient empire. Our story kicks off in the bustling, incredibly cosmopolitan seaport of ancient Puhar. Right out of the gate, the original text describes Kovalan's father as a Masathuvan, which literally translates to a man of immeasurable, abounding wealth. We're not talking about a local shopkeeper here. He was an inland merchant prince, which placed his family at the absolute pinnacle of the local aristocracy.
Think about his socioeconomic status for a second. Born into this ultra-elite Nagaratha mercantile class, Kovalan married Kanaki when he was just 16 years old. And their wedding, it was an absolute spectacle. We're talking beating drums, conchas, and specifically royal white umbrellas. In Sanganera society, having white umbrellas at your wedding was a massive deal. It meant these elite merchants were granted a level of respect and pageantry that was literally equal to that of kings.
To put this into perspective for us today, Kovalan's societal standing was essentially equivalent to the heir of a massive global conglomerate. He possessed unparalleled privilege, immense economic power, and huge social capital. He was at the very top of his world.
Moving on to Section 2. The Aesthetic Archetype. A symbol of art and beauty.
Now, extreme wealth is one thing, but Kovalan paired it with a deep, almost consuming passion for cultural refinement. He was incredibly good-looking, too. The text actually notes that the women of Puhar declared, "He is Subramanya incarnate." They were comparing his physical beauty directly to the Hindu god of war, Murugan.
But he wasn't just a pretty face. He was a master of the 64 traditional arts. Now this is important, because popular folklore often likes to paint his lover, the courtesan Madhavi, as this manipulative witch who casts some kind of spell on him. But if you read the original text, it shows Kovalan was drawn to her because she was just an absolutely brilliant classical dancer. There was no magic spell. It was just incredibly good taste. Their relationship was entirely rooted in a shared, genuine passion for artistic excellence.
1008. That is the staggering number of gold coins, or kalenju, that Kovalan dropped just to purchase Madhavi's garland after her debut performance. That is a jaw-dropping sum of money. It totally cements his role as an elite patron of the arts, but as you'll see, it also heavily foreshadows the rapid squandering of his massive ancestral fortune.
Section 3. The Compassionate Warrior. The Philanthropic Identity.
Look, beyond his obvious flaws, Kovalan is actually a deeply empathetic figure. Picture this scene. A rogue elephant breaks loose in the crowded streets of Puhar. It charges directly toward a helpless, elderly ascetic. The whole crowd completely panics and flees. But Kovalan? He leaps directly onto the beast's nape and completely subdues it using a single command in elephant language, Pu. For this absolutely astonishing act of bravery, the city gave him the title Karunai Maravan, which means the compassionate warrior.
And that immense compassion, it completely extended to his finances as well. Take the famous mongoose incident. A Brahmin woman was falsely accused and was suffering from immense societal guilt over the death of a mongoose. Kovalan stepped right in. He generously parted with his own wealth just to clear her debts and absolve her of all that suffering. He didn't just throw money at a problem, he essentially bought back her dignity.
Section 4. Ancient philanthropy meets CSR, mapping the past to the present. It's actually super fascinating to view these mythological deeds through a modern analytical lens. Think about today's corporate social responsibility, or CSR. Giving his wealth away perfectly aligns with modern community investment. Risking his life to tame that elephant? That maps directly to protecting vulnerable populations. And aiding the Brahmin woman is a flawless example of individual ethics and human rights. Kovalan really beautifully merges the responsibilities of a wealthy enterprise with a deep, personal morality.
Because of these specific deeds, literature bestows yet another title upon him, Selash Selvan, meaning the philanthropist with undiminishing wealth. The profound takeaway here is that the ancients understood something crucial. His true wealth wasn't the gold locked in his treasury. His true wealth was the relentless, charitable spirit he exhibited towards society.
Section 5. Victim of Judicial Failure. The Tragic Downfall.
So, the tone of our story shifts drastically here. Having completely lost his fortune, a deeply remorseful Kovalan, along with his devoted wife Kanaki, literally walked 250 kilometers to the city of Madurai to start over. To raise some capital, he tries to sell Kanaki's ruby-filled anklet, but in a horrible twist of fate, he encounters a corrupt state goldsmith. Now, this goldsmith was actually the real thief of the queen's missing pearl anklet. To cover his tracks, the goldsmith frames Kovalan, and without a single moment of investigation, the Pandya king simply orders his executioners to behead him.
This moment right here is a terrifying textbook illustration of arbitrary state power clashing with due process. The Pandya king makes a hasty, completely unchecked decision to execute a man based on one single accusation. There is no trial, there is no checking of the evidence, there is no defense allowed. Kovalan, who is completely innocent of this crime, is murdered by the state.
The modern parallel here is honestly pretty stark. The epic is basically warning us about the economic and societal collapse that inevitably follows a broken justice system. Think about it. If a formerly wealthy, well-connected merchant prince isn't safe from corrupt officials and a careless ruler, then literally no citizen is safe. A state that fails to uphold the rule of law will ultimately destroy its own economic and social stability.
Section 6. Arc of Karmic Repentance. Cause, Effect, and Cosmic Justice.
So, how exactly does Tamil literature make sense of such a horrific injustice happening to a guy who essentially had a good heart? It's all about repentance. Kovalan didn't die arrogant. He deeply, deeply regretted his actions. He cast aside his elite status, humbled himself before Kannagi, walked those grueling 250 kilometers, and genuinely sought to rebuild his life through honest, hard labor. His willingness to work hard and correct his mistakes is what makes him such a truly compelling, redemptive protagonist.
Yet he still gets executed. Why? Well, according to the family goddess of the Pandyas, a deity named Bharatan who speaks later in the epic, Kovalan had actually killed an innocent man in a previous life, meaning his completely unjust execution in Madurai was, in the grand scheme of things, the fulfillment of an inescapable cosmic logic. It was a karmic debt that absolutely had to be paid.
But wait, the state doesn't escape its karma either. The epic lays down this incredibly powerful sentiment. Political failure becomes death for those who err. When Kannagi later proves her husband's innocence, the sheer shock of his own failure actually kills the king on the spot. Kannagi then famously burns the entire city of Madurai to the ground. This massive destruction is presented to the reader as a cosmic correction for the state's total moral and judicial collapse.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to ponder as we wrap up today. The myth says that Kannaki's fire spared the righteous, but I want to ask you, does the total destruction of a city represent a necessary cosmic correction against a hopelessly corrupt regime, or is it simply a devastating shift from restorative justice to blind retribution revenge? It's a question that makes Cilappatikāram just as relevant today as it was centuries ago. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.